Thanks for everyone coming. We have some folks here from Layla Park, we have folks from June Park, some folks from Melbourne Village, and we really appreciate your interest and support. We hope to learn and discuss today both specific and general strategies to preserve the quality of life in Brevard County while realizing that development is inevitable. So my name is Mitch Miglis, as I said. My wife Jeannie, I've lived in the Campbell Drive neighborhood for 34 years, raised 3 children there. I'm a retired chiropractor. I'd like to take just a moment to outline the agenda today. I'll say a few words and I'll introduce our neighbor Jeff Cobb, who has deep roots in Campbell Drive, to say a few words. And followed by our guest of honor, Susan Croft, who was one of the primary organizers of the June Park successful rezoning challenge that was recently in the newspaper. You may have seen it. She's going to speak to us about her experience and give us some do's and don'ts that we can maybe take notes on. She has a professional experience in volunteerism that goes very deep, so she's well qualified. Then we'll review a short movie and presentation that I'll do. And if you hold your questions kindly to the end, we entertain them. That way we can get through the agenda in a timely fashion. So let's begin. I've introduced myself. Jeff, would you like to come up and say a few words?
Yeah. On that note, real quick, could I ask that everyone who speaks please go up to the front so that they're on the video?
Mitch and me have been real close on this, talking all the time with some of the other neighbors, and we run things past each other all the time. And Mitch is going to be going over a few things. When my father was a builder and developer, he was the first city supervisor, which they called that, is the city manager for West Melbourne. He bought the first police car and the first tractor. He leased it because they didn't have any money. So he leased a tractor. So anyway, when we had a property on 192, my dad bought a lot of properties and developed some and just flipped some. And he was a builder also. And on 192, we had a piece of property there, 2.5 acres, we just sold about 4 months ago. And that property, we went to get it rezoned. And we wanted to have it rezoned to a commercial zoning. It was rezoned to a light zoning right now. So when we went in front of Brevard County, they told us, we have a plan. We have a plan of what we want Brevard County to look like, what it to be like, the head zoning man. So he took us back and he showed us this plan of that area, and they want this BU1, they want this BU2, hard zoning, light zoning, residential, and all these plans. So I just popped in my head, why didn't I think of this? I said, West Melbourne's got to have a plan. What is West Melbourne's plan to look at this? Because every time I look around, I see building, I see apartments, I see houses, I see so much growth going on over here. So I mentioned it to Mitch. Well, next thing you know, Mitch, fantastic. Mitch started looking up and found that plan, the newest plan of what West Melbourne, what they would like West Melbourne to be. Okay, so he's going to go over a few of those things that we think are very, very important, because they are not what this development would bring to our neighborhood, for one thing. It's just completely backwards on some of these items. So I'm very pleased and happy to have Mitch on our team. And I think we all ought to give a little clap because he's worked so hard. I'm just the guy who throws things by, we talk a little bit, laugh, and we keep going. But this is the man right here who's done so much and everything. So when he called me up and he told me these items, I was just so happy, what he was telling me. So I think that's something that's important for us to remember. And I think it's something that West Melbourne as a city needs to follow and use this guideline that they're preaching that they want, because I don't think they're doing it. So this is what he's going to go over some of this stuff today. So thank you for all coming and everything, and I'll let Mitch have it. Thank you, Mitch.
Hey, Jeff, and happy birthday to Jeff.
Oh, yeah. Make it my present.
29 again.
29.
Susan, the floor is yours.
Okay, started to get sick and I thought I wasn't going to make this meeting. And so I quickly wrote down this thinking Mitch would have to read it. And my immune system kicked in and here I am. I'm not the least bit sick. Goody. So I'm going to read this instead of just speak extemporaneously, because I'm better at, like Mitch, at reading and writing than I am speaking off the cuff. So, my name is Susan Croft. My husband, Michael, and I have lived on Feast Road for almost 23 years. Feast Road is at the very eastern edge of June Park. The next street east runs by the Wawa on 192 and then into the Lowe's parking lot. On our street, we aren't the most recent arrivals, but we are still considered newcomers by comparison. Our old-time Feast Road neighbors, much like the old-timers on Campbell Drive, and along with others nearby, have experienced developer fights before, and I tap them at every opportunity. June Park's fight is partly a feel-good story of the little guys winning, but it is also a cautionary tale of what not to do. We made a lot of mistakes. Because of that, our win should be considered just barely won. On a more positive note, what we did was seriously unprecedented. I understand from back channels it sent ripples throughout the county with many of the developers sitting up and taking notice. I believe your developer may have even retooled his approach because of what happened in June Park. Mitch invited me here to tell June Park's story in support of your fight. Please take whatever you find useful. This is as cathartic for me as it might be useful for you. Before I begin, a bit of background on June Park. June Park is legally defined as a census-designated place, or a CDP. This means there's no local governance, only county, state, and of course federal. I found many of our residents were confused about us being a part of the city of West Melbourne. We are not, although we do share your post office and your zip code. So we're not in the city of West Melbourne. June Park has over 4,400 people and 1,700 households. So this is a much bigger area than, say, Melbourne Village probably, and certainly the Campbell Drive thing. So, and we also have a very high percentage of home ownership for such a large area. This fight centered on property at the very east end that sits between Feast Road and the next street over going west, Seminole Boulevard. Here's what happened. And I have to warn you that some of this story is a little rough. In early December last year, we received a letter and a site plan from the engineering firm representing the developers known as the Twilliger Brothers. You can look the Twilliger Brothers up online, and you might want to, because the Melbourne plans are still there, so you get to see what I'm talking about. They were requesting a Brevard County zoning change to enable them to build a 3-story, multiple building apartment complex on land being offered by Kane's Furniture that's on 192. It would be directly behind Kane's, with Seminole Boulevard Street on one boundary and the backyards of all the homes on the west side of Feast on the other. This meant it would be looming over our backyard, which totally dismayed Michael and I. They were inviting us to a meeting to inform homeowners only because it was required by law. Only because it was required by law. It also was a small group of homeowners because it notified only the houses that were within so many feet of this project. I knew this. I refer to those homeowners as the principals because it's kind of a legal term the lawyer used. I knew something about this because of what I had learned years ago in San Diego when zoning laws first came into existence, spot zoning laws. Concerned other neighbors might not attend, I posted a letter in the site plan on Nextdoor, exactly like Mitch did for you all. But our letter was loaded with misinformation. It claimed 14 acres when it was really 12 and a half. It claimed 186 units when it was actually more. Even the meeting date was confusing, leading one to think it was on December 15th instead of December 14th when it actually occurred. It was next door where the conflicting date was noticed by a concerned neighbor, Christine. Thank God for her, because I was promoting the 15th. We would all shut up the next day. We straightened that out pronto. This misinformation seemed more like an intentional trick than a mistake as they claimed. When I called confirming the date, I asked if they would send out a corrected letter. There was certainly plenty of time for that. They said yes, but sent no correction letter. Concerned that neighbors either didn't get the letter, would show up the next day if they did get the letter, or were not on Nextdoor to see the clarification we were making, my husband and I canvassed on foot both Feast and Seminole to spread an accurate word. Now I got to tell you folks here, these developers, they can pull all kinds of dirty tricks, so you got to be prepared. This is one of the things we learned. We met the developer and his engineer in a room at the Hampton Inn that was suitable for about 20 people. As a result of our efforts, over 30 jammed into that little room, and the meeting went rapidly downhill. They handled the meeting like it was a necessary nuisance. Their presentation was geared to investors, not homeowners who stood to lose something tangible. Several groups of homeowners were coming together for the first time there. The next door group I had encouraged, our East June Park neighbors who were directly affected, and the Facebook group that called itself June Park and turned out to be mostly West Side homeowners. They learned of the June Park Facebook group, they learned of it when someone from next door copy and pasted my post to their group. I had hoped to help all of us organize with an impromptu parking lot meeting after this developer meeting, but that hope was promptly and thoroughly dashed. A woman was recording a live feed of the meeting to her Facebook group without anyone's permission. It was intended to put the developer and the engineer on record, maybe even intimidate them, but it made just about everybody in the room edgy and uncomfortable. She was frequently in a running argument with the developer's attorney about the legality of recording. She also blurted out commentary to her group in a destructive manner. Crosstalk ensued, further messing up the meeting. It was hard to hear or be called on to ask questions. You all must be familiar with that part. And the tone became belligerent on both sides, and chaos prevailed. One neighbor shouted at the top of his voice for everyone to shut up as he began speaking. We left shortly after that, thinking the developer got just what he wanted. Others told me later they were very embarrassed by their neighbors' behaviors. It would be the first of several times we in June Park seriously shot ourselves in the foot. I sincerely congratulate all the Campbell folks on your developer meeting, remaining a civil and united opposition. I think that's largely to Mitch and Jeff's efforts, which I applaud. The one good thing to come out of our attendance was that I asked for and eventually received the copies of the reports they had done, the traffic and the environmental analysis. Once we reviewed them, we decided both studies need to be formally challenged at some point. The traffic study was conducted in August of the previous year, thus avoiding all snowbirds and our local high traffic volume that runs September to June due to a private school off of Seminole. And the environmental study was done, now get this, by a separate company, but one owned by the very engineer representing the developers. It overlooked critical details we knew could be proved. I brought those reports today, my only copies for your perusal, but please don't take them, and I'll tell you why at the end of this story. Shortly after the developer meeting, and despite some misgivings about that video maker, I joined Facebook's June Park group to see how interest was developing there. Nextdoor was not so active, so I decided to encourage my next-door contacts, my immediate neighbors, and some offline folks to join Facebook's June Park group with me. I thought we needed all the help we could get. I was wrong. Their moderator confirmed the group got a sudden influx of new members, so I took that as a good sign. I immediately hooked up with 3 people there, the video maker from the meeting, a flyer designer, and a petition maker, all looking pretty clueless for this fight. I was acknowledged as the only connection to Nextdoor, the offline people, and now Facebook, so at this trio's request, I began creating informational posts for both sites and informing the offline folks. This made me something like the hub of a wheel, keeping up with new developments and tracking who's doing what for those who wanted to join, pretty much like how I think Mitch is functioning for you all right now. Immediately, problems sprang up, and it was partly from timing. This was because the 2 county hearings, the zoning board and the commissioners, were already scheduled. You guys have the benefit of it. Maybe it's not scheduled, you might have more time. We had only 4 weekends before those hearings occurred, and 3 weekends were really bad. One was right before the first hearing to be held on Monday, January 9th. The 2 weekends before it were both holiday weekends, New Year's and Christmas. This left one good weekend, the very first one, just 4 days after that disastrous developer meeting. Let me tell you folks, organizing in high gear with stressed out strangers is never easy. I had been doing a great deal of frantic research since we got the letter about the opposition, about June Park, about pertinent land use laws such as spot zoning of the sort I had witnessed in San Diego years ago. I made many contacts quickly. A group surfaced early on who wished to begin a massive door-knocking campaign starting that first weekend. Perfect, I thought. We needed help, and this was one way it can materialize. I told them I could provide a flyer loaded with solid information. I was running everything I was doing and all the information and context I came with by the Facebook trio daily, sometimes hourly. The trio meaning the 3 people that I hooked up with. But they were not listening, and at some point, they started to talk amongst themselves and started balking at me. Ideas were not judged on any factual merit or even experience, but by whose idea was it? I took a closer look at them, and it became obvious all had secondary agendas meant to benefit them individually and professionally. I did not, and I viewed this as a bad omen. They collectively felt the petition was paramount, the petition that the petition maker was making. They felt that was paramount. Their flyers and signs would support it, and they were all set up to use the Police Foundation Park at the far west end of June Park. As far as they were concerned, no door-knocking effort was necessary. So in essence, I was outvoted. More foot shooting, I thought to myself. I tried to politely offer several significant insights. The petition might not only derail hearing attendance, but it might lack legal gravitas unless it complies with county stipulations which they had not checked. I had already run into how the federal law mandates that every body that governs is mandated by federal law to allow the people it governs to petition, but the governing body has the right to decide how that petition is formatted or accepted or any of that. We've done none of that checking at all. So I tried to politely offer several insights. The petition might not only derail hearing attendance, thinking if people sign the petition then they won't come because they think that's all they had to do, but it might lack legal gravitas unless it complies with county stipulations, which they had not checked. Also, neighbors who had been in these fights were emphatic with me that hearing attendance was everything, and it is. It really is. Lastly, the principal homeowners alone had legal standing if it should come to that. Of the 4 of us, I was the only one with legal standing and was the only one tapping experienced neighbors. I suggested the petition could go forward, even catch up with the door knockers later. But their egos flared, and we lost that first weekend as they stalled, I believe, to deliver. This effectively ran those who were interested in the door-knocking campaign off in disgust. I grew immediately discouraged. In the next few days, I was verbally abused, hung up on, and publicly flamed on Facebook by 2 of the 3 that I was hooked up with. That was too much foot shooting for me. It was clear that the Facebook June Park group was not in any way in the same fight we were. As context here, you should all know that I am leaving out much of the wasteful, damaging, and to put it without any of the deep diplomacy I used back there, shockingly childish stuff that occurred. To preserve whatever ability each side had, I carefully resigned from Facebook amid their anger. It was not an easy decision. I think they were shocked when I did it. I then tried to resurrect interest on Nextdoor, but it only limped along. The offline door knockers proved to have really vanished despite any of my assurances. We began racking up sleepless nights, Michael and I. We tried to find an attorney for ourselves, convinced that we were in this alone and would lose the fight. We failed to find one, largely, I believe, because all the locals worked for the other side. Then one day, a neighbor called me unexpectedly and offered to help. And then someone else, and then someone else. Although the first door-knocking group was gone, it seemed another one was forming around me. So I quickly mapped out a strategy, printed and assembled handouts, and offered street assignments and info packets to anyone willing. We had lost valuable time, so everyone pushed to cover as much ground as they could. We met wonderful neighbors, just wonderful. Most neighbors did not know about this and were grateful to be informed. They enthusiastically committed to attending the hearings. Meanwhile, someone named Scott Shopke, who I'd never met, reached out to me. He knew about the 2 sides of the fight and some of what caused it. Scott wanted to talk to me because his attorney was involved, and he wanted to pick my brains since much of what he heard that I had been saying panned out, confirmed by his own attorney, about the petition, about the principal's legal standing, and especially about the significance of attendance at those hearings. Since we had no luck finding an attorney for ourselves, Michael and I agreed to talk to Scott. While everyone was reluctant to trust anyone else at this point because of how much damage had been done, We opted to give him everything we had. He returned the trust with some significant findings by his attorney, such as the property on Keynes having a binding development agreement. I don't think that applies to you guys, but it was really helpful for us. Oops, too many pages. He asked me how many I thought we could get to the hearings, and I optimistically said 100. I was keeping in mind the steep attrition rate of voluntary stuff I had learned from a previous profession. I told him we were still worried, even with a potential crowd like that. We always stressed attendance and suggested emails only as augmentation to attendance or if they simply could not attend. But we knew of people who thought signing the petition was enough, and this worried us. I asked Scott if he could talk the West End folks into changing their tune. He did, and just days before the first hearing, they finally emphasized attendance and then emails. It was gratifying to see those folks come around, but I was, and I remain to this day, dismayed that fellow neighbors were treated so badly. That was completely unwarranted. I am grateful for the work of Scott Shopke's lawyer, the engineer I mentioned earlier who represented the development and owned the environmental analysis company, also sits on Brevard County's zoning board. Scott's lawyer requested that the engineer recuse himself from the board, and because an attorney requested it, I believe he did. The lawyer also made a significant contribution to the objections raised at that hearing. The first hearing was well attended. 130 people is my guess. We each gave our 2 minutes worth. Many made it clear they are not anti-development, just against incompatible development that downgrades the character of a long-standing established community, just like your situation. The zoning board voted it down unanimously. The board chair made it clear it was our attendance that did it and strongly urged everyone to make that next hearing. There was no next, however. Not to diminish our win, but it is far from the best outcome. Best would have been the developer's request being voted down by the commissioners at that next hearing. Had that occurred, that property would be off limits for a similar action. Instead, the engineer withdrew their application after the zoning board defeat in a single sentence email. Only the principals were notified, but the good news traveled fast with one big caveat: I really hope all the June Parkers will heed. The Twilliger Brothers website still shows the Melbourne Apartments as a future project, so we need to remain vigilant. We might need those reports that I brought so that for the next fight over that property, so that's why I said don't take them, they're my only copies. In closing, I can unequivocally claim that next time my husband and I will be in a much different fight from that last one. Experience and facts will prevail. Secondary agendas will be discouraged. Problem personalities will be quietly worked around. Transparency will be strongly encouraged, and timely use of all assets will be what drives the collective agenda. This is because I don't think barely winning will work next time. I can see from here the opposition is already retooling. As I mentioned earlier, I have left out details for the sake of brevity. I made sure Mitch got every relevant detail as soon as I saw his next door post. He must have felt like an avalanche hit him. I'm sorry, that's how it was. Suffice to say, the Campbell Drive folks have advantages we did not, and I can see you all are using them wisely. Make sure that the help that you offer as an individual or even as any subset group is genuinely helpful. Stay informed. Stay unified. Win this one. And then afterwards, please consider paying it forward to the next community suddenly finding itself in an unexpected fight like we have and you are. Thank you. Thank you, Mitch, for inviting me. This story was helpful, and I'm open to any questions at this time. But while you think of any questions, you just want to hold them at the end?
No, we do it.
Okay, do it now? Do it now. But before you think of any questions, in case you are, I had one thing I wanted to add that I realized I didn't put in here, and that is because the next door people and the Facebook people were so open about going to meetings, great chunks of our neighborhood were vacated. All of East Road went, most of Seminole, probably most of Henry. And when it came time, we had a lot of looky-loos driving by our streets. We weren't really sure who all those people were. And so it occurred to us, being public about being gone from house after house after house, We hired an off-duty sheriff. It cost us a couple $100, but it was worth the peace of mind, just because we had been so public. So my suggestion to you is don't be so public, or hire the sheriff if you are. So we've done that, and it was easy to do, really easy to do. So are there, now that I have said that, are there any questions? Yes?
Could you explain to everybody what spot zoning is?
Sure. Spot zoning, as far as I know, was created in the San Diego incident that happened, where a neighborhood a lot like June Park called North Park got targeted because San Diego had grown up, all the choice land was developed, they were starting to target areas that already had development that they wanted to redevelop. And North Park was a lot like the Campbell Drive neighborhood, a lot like June Park. They were middle-class homes, long established, and the developers wanted the property to redevelop it for a higher-end clientele. And the reason that they did is because North Park sat next to the shining star of Southern California, a park called Balboa Park. And so what they did is they took a piece of vacant property, they got the zoning changed, and they deliberately, but didn't out loud this, they deliberately created low-income housing that would bring in crime and bring in litter and bring in stuff that would destabilize North Park and allow them to scoop up property after property after property so they could turn it into what they wanted for the wealthy people next to Balboa Park. Now, they were so, the city planners were so at odds about this. There was a group that was against it, there was a group for it. They argued, and I happened to be dating a fellow whose uncle was one of the city planners who was against this, and they were talking about it over the dinner table a lot, and I was over there a lot, and I was hearing at the dinner table stuff I was reading in the newspaper the next day. It was very weird. And the guys, the city developers that thought this was an okay thing to do, they blabbed. And the media picked it up. And as soon as the media picked it up, it went all over the place and blew up in their faces. And next election, all the officials that had agreed to this and knew about it, and all the voluntary boards and all the developers that did it, they got their clocks cleaned. And spot zoning became illegal to do because that's what that was, spot zoning. Spot zoning isn't now, today, what I understand of it is it's not wholesale, it's a big category. There's different kinds of spot zoning. Not all of it is illegal, but quite a bit of it is illegal, and the trouble with spot zoning is if you're going to go to court, it can be tough to prove. I knew that, and so that was one of the first things that I had said to Scott that told him I knew what I was talking about. Is I said, your lawyer's probably going to tell you this, the Terwilliger brothers, they looked like they were putting in low-income housing in that apartment building. This is why spot zoning came up, is they were billing it as a high-end apartment complex, but it was really going to be low-end. And they are notorious for low end because that's what they do. And if you look up Terwilliger Brothers, and you look up Ron Terwilliger, and you get a Wikipedia page this long all about low-income housing and how he's helping them get housing. Well, he helps them get housing while his brother Bruce, who we were dealing with, is planting them in neighborhoods that are well established to run them out. So it really felt like June Park was being targeted the same way North Park had been targeted, and it really blew all my alarms, set all my alarms off, and made me get into high gear when I discovered that. So I'm not sure that that's relevant to this situation particularly, but it's something to be mindful of in the future, that sometimes the development isn't as negative as it looks. It's even more negative when you dig in. And they're intending on destabilizing the neighborhood so that they can come in and scoop up the homeowners that get run off bit by bit, piece by piece to redevelop it. So that answers it?
Yeah, and remember everybody, when they first came in and checked the zoning, they wanted a zoning change that we didn't know about, which they wanted to have a rezone to light commercial. They wanted to put townhouses there. Okay, that's what straight from the city told me, from the zoning department. They requested that they wanted to put townhouses and build homes. Build homes, put townhouses in the middle. What would have happened? It's similar to what she's talking about, would have destabilized our neighborhood. Meanwhile, the Bassilos, Annie right here, they sent letters to her. They own the first 3 homes at the beginning of our street. They wanted to buy their properties. That means they would have come from Olive Garden, straight all the way to Thornburg's, being my neighbors right next to me. Until probably they forced me out or wanted me to move or something. They would have got my 3.5 acres and maybe started heading towards Isla or something, I believe.
Well, Jeff, I think you still have a point in what they're existing to do, what they're wanting to do now.
Oh, I agree. I agree.
It's
Because,
900
yeah.
square foot homes, and investors are gonna buy them and just rent them out.
Yeah. That's what happened in a lot of spots in Palm Bay. They would buy them, investors, they didn't have the money they have mortgages on some of these houses. They didn't have the money to pay their next mortgage. So they didn't start looking at, after clientele coming in, the renters and screaming. They put somebody in there to make the next payment, okay? Then they would be next to them, somebody, and they didn't want to live next to this renter because they were a bad person. They moved, that becomes a rental, they moved, that becomes a rental. And that's exactly what she talked to us about.
That sounds
Exactly.
like it.
Yeah.
Okay, let's, thanks Susan very much.
Thank you.
If they don't get, what is how many houses are allowed in there now if they don't get a change?
We'll talk about that, and any questions that don't get answered, we'll address at the end. That is a good question, we'll come to it.
All right.
So, just a little video to start, 2 minutes.
Mitch.
That was beautiful.
Jeannie did that. So just to give you folks a sense of, you haven't been in the neighborhood, this is an aerial view. This is Target over here. This is the Olive Garden and McDonald's 192. This is Campbell Drive, which dead ends. And there are 4 feeder streets, each of which is a dead end also. None of them are very long, probably less than 0.2 miles or so. Basically, Campbell Drive is a dead end street, 22 feet wide. The only exit is, an entrance point is at McDonald's and Olive Garden, and both of those businesses have traffic exits onto Campbell Drive already. This intersection is a right turn only intersection coming out of Campbell Drive. It's severely congested as it is, and we kind of live sort of in this cocoon back there where you saw this beautiful hammock-like vegetation, and this is what we're looking at when we say that the potential development is incompatible. This is what they want to do. This is all they've submitted that we have access to right now. They don't have a site plan yet, but you can see 24 plots laid out for homes. Retention pond in the back. This is Campbell Drive over here. There are lots of problems with that, and we'll get into that in just a little bit. So the main neighborhood concerns here is they propose a 24-hour home subdivision, which is grossly incompatible with the established neighborhood, as you saw. We have, I think Chip counted 56 homes in the neighborhood, of which 6 are 2-story, and none of those are on Campbell Drive. If they put in 24-foot homes, or 24 homes, and those homes are 2-story, that's an increase of 400% in 2-story homes in the neighborhood from the established quota. So, Traffic congestion already exists in the neighborhood, Street Campbell Drive. Added cars and vehicles, some people have talked about, well, they put in 24 homes, or extra those homes, 2 cars per home. Well, that's a little bit underestimating, I believe. 2 cars, maybe a teenager, maybe a guest, maybe a friend, maybe 2, 3, 4 cars per home. And similar neighborhoods that we've surveyed that have been built by Miranda, there have been multiple complaints about parking boats in the street, cars in the street. You can't drive through the streets because it's so congested. And not only do we have the quota of the residents' vehicles, we have to consider the service vehicles, and the Amazon, the UPS, and the FedEx, and the garbage trucks and all that, which is additional traffic that is going to be drawn like a magnet here. Drainage and flooding issues. Campbell Drive already has a flooding issue. How will removing close to 9 acres of permeable land not aggravate the existing drainage and flooding issue on Campbell Drive? Will the retention pond that's proposed be adequate? What will happen to overflow when that occurs? Where will that go? How are they going to mitigate that? These are big questions. Safety. There are no sidewalks on Campbell Drive. There's very little lighting for night vision. There's a school bus stop in front of McDonald's on Campbell Drive, just a few feet from that dangerous intersection, by the way, which has a pedestrian warning stanchion planted right in the middle of it.
Somebody's actually killed there too.
Somebody got killed there. One of our neighbors just got hit there the other day in his truck. My wife, well, I disclosed that to you, but she was hit in an intersection just a little ways away a few years ago. Similar situation. Fortunately, she's okay. She could have been killed. Campbell Drive is home to a number of native Florida fauna and flora. These are just some examples of what we've seen in the neighborhood: red-shouldered hawks, ospreys, otters, bobcat, pileated woodpeckers, gopher tortoises, black snakes, rat snakes, red-breasted woodpecker, etc., etc. Stately live oak and laurel oaks are common. What will be their fate? Can we develop the neighborhood with some sense of harmony with the natural world? Again, we emphasize, like Susan said, we are not anti-development. We want sensible development. Personal safety concerns. We have 2 adult individuals in the neighborhood are disabled. One is visually impaired and rides his motorized bike to and from his job. His parents told me that was the sole reason they bought in the Campbell Drive neighborhood, because it was safe for their son, a disabled son, to have a life. And that is in jeopardy now. So I went, like Jeff said, and looked at the Horizon 2030 comprehensive plan for the city of West Melbourne. And I know they're actually working on an updated version now, and we'll be monitoring that as well. But I think it will probably essentially capture the same point. So I want to go through that with you. And the reason that prompted me, during the meeting with the developer in Melbourne Village a few weeks ago, the engineer for the developer said, hey, what are you guys objecting to? We're following the comprehensive plan. We don't understand all this pushback. And I scratched my head. I said, comprehensive plan? I'm going to look into that. How can this be in harmony with the neighborhood? So I looked it up, and bottom line here, folks, is I'm going to challenge that assumption that he's working in harmony with the comprehensive plan. I'm going to show you why. So, by the way, you can access this plan. It's readily available at the West Melbourne site. There's the URL for it. I encourage you to take a look at it, because I did sort of an informal scan. I cut and pasted. Probably someone could go through it in much more detail and extract further information. But this is just what I gleaned on the first run. So these are direct quotes from the comprehensive plan of the City of West Melbourne. The plan pledges that the city will maintain the small town, hometown sense of place. The city will foster direct character that is distinctly West Melbourne. The city will establish land development patterns that integrate neighborhoods, business areas, and public spaces that enable the city to achieve the following priorities. Look at the number 1 priority. A, number 1, protect West Melbourne established neighborhoods. I added the caps for emphasis. Okay? Quote, they believe they're going to propose housing sites which will be reviewed on an individual basis according to the following criteria: the size and density of the project, and number 2, compatibility and connectivity with surrounding uses. Okay? The comprehensive plan shall encourage flexible design and construction standards that allow existing neighborhoods to be redeveloped and updated consistent with the original design and character of the neighborhood. Okay? And as appropriate, identify and encourage preservation and retainment of historically significant housing in neighborhoods. Campbell Drive is almost 100 years old. And we've been told that the Campbell Drive neighborhood is one of only 2 remaining historic West Melbourne neighborhoods. So I would say this comprehensive plan identifies our neighborhood as worthy of preservation in the very words of the city of West Melbourne. So the plan further says that the city is to protect and support the city's small town feel and preserve West Melbourne as the best little small town in Central Florida by ensuring that the city's future planning and development practices foster architectural design features and building standards that confirm the city's small town and sense of place. The city also promises to identify the specific identity of the block. Well, I must have miscopied that one. We'll move along. Foster the development of pedestrian-friendly streets. No sidewalks, 22-foot wide street, heavy congestion already. Children walking on this street, disabled adults walking on this street, people walking their dogs, jogging, bicycling. Is that a pedestrian-friendly street when you put 24 homes in there? Road bike lanes and sidewalks and crosswalks. Ensure that the developers identify, address, and mitigate the environmental impact of all new and redeveloped projects. Promote the reduction of the amount of stormwater runoff by reducing paving areas. How is covering 9 acres and building the land up to put a subdivision in reducing paving areas? Preserve natural areas. Same question. Using drought-tolerant landscaping. We haven't seen a site plan, so we're not sure what landscaping is going in there. But I can tell you from, many of you were at the meeting, the developer, the engineer or developer one, I'm not sure, was pressed for what their interest was and what type of homes they would put in. And they basically said, we have to look at what the bottom line is, what we can make financially profitable. And then they were pressed more, and they said, well, the offset between homes will be 15 feet. Pressed more, they said there'll be 2-story homes. Pressed more, they said they'd be 2,500 to 3,500 square foot homes in the $500,000 price range. That leaves little land for landscaping or runoff. That's covering it over wall to wall, 15 foot apart. If you leave here today, as you go out, if you're headed toward 192, take a look to your right. It's Heritage Oaks, I believe it's called. Look at the spacing between the homes, the 2-story, all look gray, cookie cutter, same color, 15 feet apart. I can't say that's what they're going to put in, but it seems like they hinted at that, and so I wonder. West Melbourne commits to ensuring development pays for their impacts, provides for future service needs and infrastructure demands. Well, anyone that does develop in that area, Campbell Drive, shouldn't they put in sidewalks? Shouldn't they put in lighting if the citizens want it? Maybe a stoplight at the intersection? Okay?
And remember in that meeting, our first meeting, they said they were not responsible for that.
That's right.
They'd have to only pay impact fees to the city.
The city's neighborhoods are designed to provide the community safe, vibrant places to live and share life with family, friends, and neighbors. So summarized by directly quoting from West Melbourne's comprehensive plan, everything I put in there in quotations right out of the plan, and I stitched it together. So it's, let's maintain the city's small town sense of place and preserve West Melbourne as the best small town in Central Florida by carefully striving to protect West Melbourne's established neighborhoods and preserving historically significant housing in neighborhoods. Development is inevitable. Let's continue to embrace sensible growth that respects who we are in this special community and fight inappropriate growth that reduces the quality of life for all who live here. By doing so, we honor the comprehensive plan for neighborhoods, quote, designed to provide the community safe, vibrant places to live and share life with family, friends, and neighbors. Placing a 24-home subdivision in the heart of Campbell Drive neighborhood is grossly inconsistent and incongruous with the nature of that neighborhood and will result in a reduction of the quality of life of those who live here, including the health and safety of our neighbors and their children and grandchildren. Please say no to rezoning in the Campbell Drive neighborhood. So, how can we help preserve the Campbell Drive neighborhood? Most important, as Susan and others have said, attend the West Melbourne Planning and Zoning meeting. We believe it's going to be April 12th, but it may not. It could be pushed off to another meeting, maybe a month later. Depends on all the documents are submitted and returned to the city in a timely fashion. So right now, we're guessing April 12th, but that could change. We'll notify on Nextdoor, and Jeannie and I'll have a Facebook page up by the end of the weekend. Email the City of West Melbourne officials and let them know your concerns. Interestingly, the City of West Melbourne is very efficient. That's the only email address you need. If you send emails to that address, and you specify that you want them to go to the City Council, the Planning Zone, the Planning Department, the Mayor, City Attorney, I've got a printout here that tells you all the individuals you can request. If you send your email to that one email address, that person will distribute to everybody that you want to distribute it to. You don't have to email everybody individually.
Does that have to be in the subject line or just in the first part of the body of the letter?
That I don't know. Subject line might be Campbell Drive rezoning, so you know, to Campbell Drive rezoning. Well, the other thing I've learned from a reliable source is that there are several of these city officials, more than one, that will answer every email that is sent to them. Some will actually call you if you put your phone number in, and you can discuss it with you. So I'm going to put my phone in. Maybe you can have a discussion with the relevant parties as a result of your email. Next is sign the petition. Petition's important, but there are really two petitions going around. There's one for the principals, as Susan said, those individuals legally entitled to notification within 500 feet, and then everybody else. So we're segregating those for two reasons. The city looks at the principals petition with much more intent than they do the other. Now, what can happen? There are, I believe, 54 or something principals. And if we can obtain signatures opposing rezoning in only 20% of those 54 signatures, so it's 10 or 12 signatures, whatever, should the matter pass zoning and end up at City Council, the vote on the matter now becomes a supermajority. So in order for the developer to prevail, he doesn't have to get 4 votes, he now has to get 5 out of 7 votes. And all we need is 20% of the principals to sign that petition to bump that up to supermajority.
Yeah, we have 5 now, Mitch.
We have 5 already.
We have 5 today. And remember, anybody can sign the other petition. The one that says, you don't have to live within 500 feet, anybody can sign it.
What's the petition that we've already signed? What were those? Not today, previously.
That would have been the general one.
Okay.
Anybody haven't signed it yet?
Well, I did
General one.
I did the general one, but I'm also a principal, so.
I know.
We have the 500-foot one here, too.
Yeah, the 500-foot one is the one you want
The
to sign.
500-foot one's there?
And is there a way to get one
I'll
to
get
take
one.
to neighbors that aren't available to me today that I can maybe take to them?
Yeah, yeah, we
Yes.
can get you some.
We do have a list of the principals.
That's the 500 feet one. Anybody hasn't signed the general one?
They are, that's what it is.
Okay.
Yes. So folks, to answer your question, Michael, earlier about if this rezoning request is defeated, what happens next? Well, our position, and really, when I say our position, I'm a conduit for all you folks. I've talked to most all of you and every other neighbor in that block. And the consensus is we are not anti-development by any means. We're not unrealistic. We know that property will be developed and others will be developed and so forth. We just want it to be developed harmoniously with the nature of the existing established neighborhood. So the way it's zoned now, if that zoning request is approved, they can put in 24 homes like this, you saw. If it's not approved, they can still put in about 21 homes. So some people are saying, well, this is a fight over 3 homes. What the heck? Yes and no. We might be able to prevail on some of these other points in future zoning hearings, regardless of what that's. I don't know the nuances of that, but I would cross that bridge when we got there, and I would make the same arguments. If someone comes in and puts 21 homes that are incongruous with the neighborhood, then all of us should be stepping forward as best we can to resist that. Whether we have legal standing to do so, it's going to be harder to stop. But
Once they change the zone, they have precedent to change the zone again.
yes,
To divide another way.
this is the point, to get to Chip's point here. This loops back to Susan's account of spot zoning. Once they get zoning from R2A to R1A, then any other subsequent properties in the neighborhood could be subject to precedent on future purchase. And once a property is R1A, you can put a 900 square foot home on it. Not that it would, but you can put a lot more stuff on there that's incompatible with the neighborhood. And it's like someone said, that's the camel's got his nose under the tent, you know, and as soon as it gets that, the rest of the camel comes down. We don't want to give that domino effect where the whole neighborhood just collapses in cascading fashion because zoning has been liberalized. So questions now, I guess I'm finished. Yeah.
What must they file before the planning and zoning meeting, the developers?
Well, right now, by the way, the planning and zoning department in West Melbourne has been very transparent, very cooperative. They've shared digital copies of everything that's been submitted because of public disclosure laws, as I understand it. And what we have now is basically a souped-up version of that sort of plat layout. The principles list and some aerial drawings. The key thing is we don't have a site plan. We don't know, you know, I alluded to what they said they might build there. They could say, well, we never said that. What they're actually going to build there, we don't know. The way I understand it, they can go through zoning, and then when they get permits from the building department, that's when they can specify what's going in there. So we're kind of in the dark. But if you look at what they've done, and that initial drawing, it does hint at maximum density, maximum profit, you know, minimum environment.
I have a question. I'm wondering in that same rezoning, if they get that rezoning, if they go back and revert to what they rezoned. Jeff learned about townhomes. Does the townhomes, is that included in the rezoning?
That would have been a light commercial, the townhomes in there.
Oh, okay.
And they told them, just when they came in and started talking about it, they said, no, we're not going to even budge on that.
Okay.
The ladies in the zoning.
Okay.
Michael?
But that's not to stop Andy's property if they got it.
Not only do I have a concern about the number of homes, but I have a very strong concern about the destruction of the environment. I lived in Orlando for 20 years, and the people over there got up in arms about all the clear-cutting destruction of the environment over there. And they finally started passing some ordinances that said, you've got to save a certain percentage of trees out here. You know, they mark all these trees, and now you see developments and commercial areas that have a lot of trees, you know, saved. But my concern is you've got hundreds and hundreds of old oak trees and den trees and all this other stuff over there. If they come in and clear cut it like we see all over the area these days, can't they pass some kind of ordinances that say you've got to save a certain amount or percentage of trees?
Mitch, can I answer that one? The city of West Melbourne has their own set of ordinances, but above them are Brevard County ordinances, and I became familiar with some of that, and the environmental report that was relevant to our fight talks about how, because of the nature of the neighborhood, they were going to be required to leave so much in the way of hammock and trees, and there were also trees that were special that they were going to have to work around, and things like, if you look at that report, the clear cutting I think we're seeing is on property that's fair game for that because there's no existing standards set to it. There are vacant lots that have nothing around them, and nobody objected to it when it was proposed. So there's some safety net that if the city of West Melbourne, the city of West Melbourne can't operate outside of Brevard County. So Brevard County ordinances will at some point cover what West Melbourne doesn't. So if you look at that environmental report, you'll see.
Why isn't Brevard County overlooking those areas that aren't being opposed as it is now then?
They are, and where those vacant lots have no precedent set, they're allowing them to clear cut. Take it up with the county. You know, I don't like it either, but
So should we approach the county or?
I don't know, but I'm just saying that if you had, they're going to have to, I believe, they're gonna have to do an environmental study before they get to the City of West Melbourne Council,
They mentioned
because
that at the meeting?
somebody will be able to object to them voting on something without that. And
I
they'll,
don't recall if they mentioned that they weren't going to do an environmental
yeah,
study.
they're gonna have to.
They have
Okay, they did say they don't have to do a traffic.
Well, the thing I noticed he was saying is, we don't have to do a traffic study right now, he kept saying, right now. I don't know if that means all the way through, or if it's somewhere, now, what I'm seeing is, our guys spent a lot of money doing 2 reports, and they were gonna have to do a 3rd one, a flood analysis, before they got to the commissioner. We were gonna insist on it, the attorney was insisting on it. Your guys retooled, so they have spent hardly anything in the way of stuff. It leaves you guys still working in the dark in a much bigger way than we were, because I at least got these 2 things, and we were gonna object to those because they were badly done. So, this may end up being that they go away at some point, realizing you're gonna oppose it too much even. It may not even make the agenda of the City of West Melbourne, but I'm just saying, there's a lot of parts to this that it would be much better if, whenever they get stuff, you get a hold of it and figure it out.
And in the first meeting, they told us we didn't have to have a traffic study, the engineer.
Right.
But when we were talking to West Melbourne, they said they would.
Yeah, let's see.
There's 2 things there.
You should be talking to West Melbourne about some of this stuff.
About
not
the traffic
developers.
study, I just talked to them the other day again in zoning. There's a reference document that the developers referred to, it's very technical, and according to that, based on the numbers the developers submitted, a traffic study needed to be done because this project was too small. The city doesn't take that on faith. The city hires their own traffic engineer to review the numbers of the study and give a second opinion. That has been sent out, we don't have the results of that yet. James?
I have a concern that I'm sure we all have, is that, you know, we want to save those beautiful trees because that's part of the Hamlet environment.
And also the sound barrier.
Yeah, and I don't think we'd be upset to have some nice homes in as long as those trees were there, but with the design they have, it's impossible because we know, we've seen it with our eyes, they're gonna have to take these trees out. So maybe this is why we need an attorney, because, you know, how can they maintain this environmental aspect? Andrea, this city council member, she's okay, you know, with being just
I thought you were
not being a fly on the wall. She's okay, she's on our side.
Well, yes,
She said, well, they can, as long as they replant trees, I guess they consider that, you know, environmental.
Take 100 years.
Cut down a live oak that's 300 years
I
old,
agree.
put up a roble
I
palm.
agree.
Exactly.
yeah.
When they did Spring Garden, my brother had to pay $10,000 for a tree inventory. They went in there and they marked everyone, they did it with a drone, they marked dead trees that were bigger than 6 inches in diameter, the ones that the beetles had gotten, they
Would be a fine, yeah.
Every one of them was marked. You had to pay for that.
Yeah, because there's no way
Save the
there's
trees
no
or
way
save
they
them?
can put that plan
They-
on the
they
site
may-
if they
He has
maintain
2 properties.
the
right?
trees that
There's
are
one
there,
on Spring
right?
on Eagle.
No, there's no way.
There's no way, right?
Develop that.
There's no
And,
way.
and Tammy mentioned something. Tammy, when you said about the noise, you
Yeah,
were
sound
so
barrier.
right. All down the south side of my property line
Yeah.
is solid trees. I
Right.
got a whole
Those
wooded
are going-
area.
I'm
That's
sure they'll
what's
come behind
blocking-
that.
That's what's blocking everybody behind me from all that noise from 192.
Well, but Salvation Army too, across from us, has to have a 12-foot barrier also.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Before I forget about
That's
it,
trees.
I want to mention about the attorney. Thank you for commenting that. So, why should we get attorney? Should we get an attorney? I'm open to suggestions, and some people have already contributed, but the feeling was, I surveyed 8 or 10 neighbors, and I think 8 of them said absolutely, and 2 said, well, maybe. So, based on that, I proceeded, and the $200 was determined on sort of the back of the, napkin calculation there, having enough reserve that we don't have to come back and ask you for another check for a while, and we'll be able to print signs or hire this attorney. The attorney requires a $2,500 retainer and draws off that at $350 an hour. So it's not cheap.
And we got one shot at it.
And the attorney
So,
that we had selected, after going through, this was the fourth attorney, two of them said they recused themselves because of conflict of interest, which is what Susan ran into. So the fourth one we got is in the same law firm that represented June Park. So it's not Mr. Wiederman, but Mr. Nathan Maloon, who's a junior partner. And he's agreed to represent us. I think...
and mention what was his partners? One was somebody...
Alex? Well, the other one who's in there is Scott Knox, who used to be the county attorney for Brevard County.
County attorney.
So there's some very, deep legal knowledge as far as zoning. So his, Mr. Maloon made several points, and I think it's very repeating. One is that if we walk into the zoning meeting with an attorney representing us, we've got some gravitas right there. And we're going to have a court reporter there too, which is, should there be anything but adherence to the strict intent of the law, if there's any shenanigans, it will be legally recorded, and we can appeal in a court of law if we want to. We get a second chance. Second reason is that send the message to the developer that we're not just yelling and screaming and jumping up and down. We're putting money down, we hire an attorney, and we're not going away. That in itself may be enough of a thorn to make the other side think twice. So for those reasons, I think it's prudent to have an attorney. And $200 per household, I think it's a good investment.
And not only are we helping ourselves with all this, we're setting a precedence, hopefully, for the rest of West Brevard development. It's out of hand, in my opinion. They're building everywhere they can, tearing stuff down. This can help everybody in the future.
And just FYI, Miranda Homes, I encourage you to Google the Miranda Home Reviews. You find that they're very, very low end. They pick the cheapest materials they can to get the job done. And also, the one guy that was at the meeting, the Italian guy, he said they have 5 homes they choose from. They can't do, custom homes. They have 5 models they choose from. You can choose one of the 5. And again, when you go down Minton Road, you can look, on the right on your way home, and you'll see, what they look like. That's the kind of home that they do these days.
Is that not
It's
the
the same style.
No.
It's not the style that we all have in our neighborhood. It's
Similar.
you've seen it. You know what it looks like.
Does it have a palm tree out front?
Yeah, I'm sure.
Terry, did you have a guess?
I can, if I can add to it. I'm Terry Eno. I'm one of your neighbors in Melbourne Village. I'm also a real estate broker for 30 years. I've sold in your neighborhood. And I want to tell you that perception is more important than reality. I've driven a whole lot of people, a whole lot of places in this county. And people are attracted to West Melbourne and neighborhoods like ours because of the spaciousness, because of the distance between your homes. And when we first come down Campbell, they're going, oh my God, they're looking around. And obviously, the further back we go, the greater it is. If they start driving down Campbell and go, oh my God, you hear the 2 tones, it's true. And it tells you right there where the money is going to be spent. We own an acre in Melbourne Village. It's extremely important to us because the ability to buy acreage is dwindling all over the county, as you say. I'm not knocking Miranda, and I'm not knocking their reason for trying to develop an area with high density. We all work for money. Every one of us in this room, the reason we work is for money, and they're doing their jobs. Your job is to defeat it. And your job is not to let them profit off your backs. Because if they take away the luxury of your properties and your trees, if your values decline because of the, oh my God, driving in because it looks like a bunch of plastic townhomes there, which have their place in time, but not off Campbell Drive.
West of 95.
There we go.
Yeah,
So,
there you go.
we, as a broker, I'm speaking in that avenue to fight pay the attorney. I'll kick in $200 today. I really think you should get an attorney, be as strong as you can the first time out the door. Secondly, as a Melbourne Village resident, and I absolutely do not have the authority, or I'm speaking on behalf of Melbourne Village. But when they clear cut all that acreage, now they're going to raise it up. Your flood water is going to come over on Melbourne Village. It's going to impact the privacy in the woods and all of that backs up Melbourne Village. All of those reasons, I certainly, as a single owner over there, would be opposed to this. We will attend the planning and zoning meeting. As many people from Melbourne Village that can come, I hope will come, and will certainly support that in any way. I'm not speaking officially and wouldn't pretend to, but we're your neighbors. If we can help you, we will help you. Get the attorney.
Thank you. Remember, during that meeting, what they told us, why are you building here? Somebody said that to the engineer, and he said, we're running out of land.
Yep.
Remember, that's why they wanted to come into our neighborhood and build.
Well, then they want to stop.
Yep, exactly.
You run out of land.
I went down to Fellsmere, to that restaurant down at Babcock Creek, Fellsmere. Oh, so much beautiful land out there. Tons of land out there. But they want to stay, come in our neighborhood. And
Well, I looked up the one guy, just, I'll say this, is, there was the engineer, and then there was the other guy.
The Miranda rep, or
I looked him up on LinkedIn, and his title is Land Acquisition for Miranda Homes. So Michael Dreyer sold him the property because that's his job, to get land acquisition. He lives in Indian Atlantic. Yeah, he doesn't live in West Melbourne, so to him it's just a piece of land. He doesn't get that, what's going on.
He would if his mama lived there.
What's that?
He would if his mom lived in your neighborhood.
Yeah, exactly.
It wouldn't like it for her.
And they don't own it yet. Yeah, they don't own
Maybe
it.
just to follow up, that hasn't been sold yet.
Yeah.
It's continued. It's in-
Yeah, if they get the zoning passed, then they'll go through.
Your job is to.
They have a deposit down,
They have a deposit down, but it hasn't
but
closed.
very
Well,
likely,
some of them talked about splitting it up and
Bobby, did you have a question?
I do. I'm only Freddie coming over on Crystal Oaks. This is our second meeting here, and the passion is really wonderful. And I think we're all on the same page with what we like about our neighborhood and what we don't want to have in the neighborhood. My question is our objectives. What are we trying to accomplish? Sounds like we are trying to accomplish overturning or preventing this change in zoning, which will prevent them from building the 24 houses, but not the 16. And from listening, it's the 16 still that we're in objection to.
well,
So are we going to have to go another step beyond this? Should we look at a different direction of this? Should we look at rezoning the area ourselves? Can we put a petition in to rezone it to us even less? If we're going to get an attorney, if we put that in front of the city council and say, we would like this zone to only 8 houses or 6 houses, and does that put a conflict with the builder and tie it up, quote unquote, litigation, to where they can't do anything because there's another petition to change the zoning?
I say the city got it real hard.
Because, well, and you're listening, we want to keep the trees in there. We want to keep the amount of flooding down. We want to keep the traffic down. And we're not going to get that to 16 houses. We're going to have to reduce that to keep it what the rest of the neighborhood feels like.
Well, plan for Miranda.
But that's okay.
Yeah, that would be good.
That's
But then
okay.
so we have
again, it's also
56
South
houses.
Andrea,
We have 56 houses in our neighborhood. 5 on your street are 2-story. Mitch is the only 2-story on our street, Orangeview. None on Campbell, none on Oak Crest.
None on
None
Isla.
Oak Crest, which mirrors Thornburg's property. None on Isla. So all of those are set on estate-sized lots, which don't look down into the neighboring properties. They all have trees, or they're in the middle of the lot. They can't look down into the neighboring property. And these are all, I think if we can just win on the no rezoning, they're gonna walk away. Otherwise, they will already bought.
There'll be somebody out there
Let's
What's
let
that?
Andrea speak.
Even then they walk away.
Have an answer to that.
Hi, I'm Andrea Young. I'm a West Melbourne City Councilman. When I came in, someone said, oh, you're the lady from the city. No, you didn't elect me to work for the city. You elected me to work for you. So there are 7 city councilmen. We all work for you. We don't work for the city.
Are you in our district?
We don't have districts.
Okay.
All 7 of us
All
work for
through the
all
whole
of you.
city?
Where are the other 6?
Well, if we were here, I would be able to speak. Okay, so I wanted to bring up the 2030 comp plan. We are now working on the 2040 comp plan. If you go to westmelbourne.gov, and if you just go to the site map, well, actually, right up at the top, it will say, I want to, put in their comp plan update, and then scroll down, it will show you there's been 2 public meetings, December 22 and January 23, which are public meetings asking you, what do you want in your city? That's the comp plan for 2040. They're updated every 10 years, and this is how we decide what's going to go where. So these meetings are over now. So they are advertised, and we look forward, and we have it all laid out at City Hall where we have our meetings, waiting for public to come, and nobody comes.
Well, nobody heard about it, have we?
No.
Yeah, so we don't know how to do it.
It's on the website, you're right. We don't have the usual 2, 4, 7, 9 to put it on TV like we used to. Everyone's watching things, so it is hard to get the word out. But the comp plan is very, very important. Someone brought up that the deal hasn't closed yet, the developer, it's subject to the rezoning. So the only thing the city councilman, only thing we can do is not approve the rezoning to get these 75-foot lots. It's already zoned for 85-foot lots, which would give you at least 20, not 16 homes there. Now, as far as you mentioned, can you get it lower? 16, 15, even less. I'm thinking if y'all went together, bought a lot, but that you could put 2 really terrific homes on that property, and that would be enough right there. But I don't think you can get it to go down the other way, but I'm going to find out. That's an excellent question. It's an excellent idea, and I'm
But
going
in
to
the
find out.
future, after we get past this, for
It'll
the
be
next
somebody
year,
else.
but we can go, does the revamping of this comprehensive plan happen yearly?
It happens every 10 years.
Oh, geez.
Yeah.
Sorry, we missed that one.
10 years.
Is this the 10 years?
Yes, so this is our 2040.
When's the deadline for the 10 years?
Oh, well, it was 2030 plan, 2040 plan, before the 2030 was the 2020
But I
plan.
mean, when's the deadline for getting your suggestions?
I don't know, the deadline is probably in here.
It's 10 years from now.
No, no, but
So
Can
it's
that-
still
can that be
ongoing,
amended?
it's still ongoing.
For this one,
there are amendments for certain things that
For
come
the
up. We have
update.
amendments that happen. But if you look on the website, you see photos and things of some of the few of the residents that did come out there to talk about what the plans are for the city of West Melbourne. Flooding is an issue. Now, I have been up and down Campbell. That little ditch that runs next to Campbell right there, that is actually an official canal. That's a county canal. It's a county canal.
It's not intended to at
It is
all.
not. It is not at all. If
30
you, again,
years
if you go on the
ago, I-
website and go to maps, there's a bunch of maps. Scroll down to the canal maps, and it'll show you which are county maps, which are Melbourne Tillman, not county maps, which are county canals and which are Melbourne Tillman canals. Melbourne Tillman doesn't have any canals north of 192, so when you see red, those are county canals. You're right. There's been no maintenance of that canal at all.
And you said it's county?
It's a county canal.
Oh, well.
So the city doesn't have to-
None.
Because I called, 30 years ago, I counted the city of West Melbourne. They did fully come out and dredged it out back then.
Well, that would be city.
Well, the city does try to maintain it.
They
when I
do.
call them,
Well,
Yeah.
as they're maintaining.
They're trying.
As you can see, it's hardly more than a ditch. And that's supposed to enter into the M1 and then go up from there.
The M1 has come up so high that it's gone back up Campbell.
Exactly.
And gone up our drain pipes on Orangeview. We've had our street flood up from the M1, so.
It was having, we had that stop sign right there at Campbell and Islip one year.
So
The tropical
we
storm.
do have
And the
flooding
city also
issues,
put a
and this is
filter
good
box
point.
at the end of Campbell, which constricts it further.
Mhm.
So
If you look at
This
it,
is an excellent point.
We've had 15 feet up in my yard from that ditch.
I think they should just pay to raise all of our houses up to the current Miami-Dade standard, because mine was built in 65. The raising of the land at 65 was not what it is today. So those Marana homes are most likely going to be, I don't know whether it's going to be 18 inches above the road, whatever you rule.
But it will be higher.
It is going to be higher than the existing Oak Crest, mine and Orange View, and whatever. My yard, when we have storms like that, it's 6 inches deep all the way, all around, as it is. Because there is a swale, and I put quotes around that, that is supposed to drain into the behind your house and the one that's in back by Savannah. No, there's one that runs behind your that actually
It's
builds.
Crane Creek.
No, what it's called?
Well, I know it's part of Crane Creek. It's
No, there's one that runs.
It doesn't matter.
It's
Yeah.
not, whatever it is.
We've all got flooding problems in the
It
area.
is long since overgrown, and
Right.
it's really, it's a vestigial, it's done. There's nothing there at all. So it does not pour into that canal that's on the end, the one in the back by Isla that runs in the back, you know, that was supposed to run down and come out by the bridge in Melbourne Village where they have all the rocks and whatever. That, you know, they did, I one time go in there and clear that out a little bit and whatever. But all the feed doesn't go that way. It just sits there until it percolates into the ground.
And that's all county, what we're talking about here, correct?
Well, that's
So
Sweet
it's
Harbor
not
Village
the
and
county canal.
Yeah. So I guess
I
we
was-
need to get
My point
whole
in
county.
telling
Tammy, I was told that was Melbourne Village ditch about 2 months ago. They were out there doing a little work at Frank's
Told I
house
do.
on the end. And Melbourne Village said that was their ditch and they were out there trying to maintain it.
Told by who?
The workers from Melbourne Village. They had a little machine out there digging that ditch out.
That's
And I asked them, I said, is this yours? And they said, yes. We're out here maintaining it.
Well, I've been to Melbourne Village 3 times in the last 6 months to dig that ditch out. It feeds off the retention pond behind Target because it overflows when we get storms.
I didn't know that. That's
And
from
it is completely blocked from my next door neighbor's house all the way back to Target. I mean, it's just, you know, that needs to be cleared out, but they're not even cleaning that out.
Wow. Yeah, they were just doing behind
My point is, Melbourne Village and all that we're talking about is all county. So I guess we all need to get with the county and have them start maintaining it.
Andrew, did you
So that's
finish what you had to say?
Well, I'm trying to give your meeting back to you, but my point in telling you this is that you have more power than the city does right now, because all your councilmen can do as representatives of you is follow the law, and they can still build their set on the 85-foot lots. We can't change it and make the zoning more difficult for them because we don't want them to be there. We'd be in court in a minute. We can't do that. It's up to you. Just like Heritage Oaks, they wanted to put in, or the developer there wanted to put in 3-story apartments right in front of the single-family homes. Same thing as you were saying right there, which would be looming all over them. The residents came out with pitchforks and torches, figuratively, and drove them out because their purchase agreement was subject to, just like what you just said over there, the deal hasn't closed, it's subject to, and drove them out. So they went elsewhere, and if you drive by there, you'll see there's a subdivision there of more single-family homes, just like the other single-family homes. So you can do it, it's just the power's with you. It's not you.
What is Heritage Oaks zoned as? What is the zoning for Heritage Oaks?
Single family in the back, but now they're out to the
2A,
front. I
1A?
couldn't tell you the number, no, single family. I couldn't tell you what
Because,
number,
I
it's
mean-
different.
They need a car wash in there.
It doesn't affect us.
And it's in Dollar General.
The Dollar General and
But
car
it
wash.
is commercial in the front, where you see there's a memory care place in there, so it's commercial in the front and all residential in the back. And we asked the residents, what do you want here? Before we zoned it, we asked them, what do you want? And they wanted commercial in the front. They wanted restaurants, coffee shop, little store that they can take their bikes to, golf carts to, that kind of thing. So we asked them what they wanted and we zoned it accordingly. You have a great city council. We are all extremely aware of who we work for. We work for you. Just come to council, come to the planning and zoning meeting, and just talk to them. Don't do the pitchforks and torches. Don't yell at them. They don't like that. And we're you. We're not the big county. We shop at Publix just like you do. You shop right next to us. We drive on the same street. So we honor you.
Andrew, I think the horse has left the barn, and the saying goes.
It's zoned.
I don't think, I don't know if you can roll it back now. It's just, you know.
Have you ever seen that?
Dwayne, you have
Yes.
any questions?
Mitch, you so nicely delineated that it was probably the 2030.
2030.
Now, how does that compare with the 2040? In other words, are there any of the stipulations that Mitch listed as far as maintaining the integrity and the appearance
That's
that
kind of boilerplate,
are-
they were in the
that are
2020.
that are
Yes,
upheld in the 2040?
yes, they will be upheld in the 2040 as well, but that's just talk, you have to actually do it, and unless people like you are there saying.
Right, but that's critical,
Yeah.
because if they go in and they develop what, in my view, a high-density, low-quality operation in our neighborhood, that's diametrically opposed to the 2030 plan, and should be diametrically opposed to the 2040 plan. And what I don't understand is how the heck the council even accepted anything from them based on what we know, because it doesn't fit with
It
your
hasn't.
plan. Oh, okay. It's not complete?
Until.
They haven't done their site plan yet.
Okay, all right,
On the phone,
'cause
sent me a text, we're
Right.
not aware, it hasn't come that far yet.
Okay,
By the time it gets to us, it will have already gone through planning and zoning, the deal will
Sure.
most likely be all done. I'm so glad she let me know that this was going on, so that
Yeah.
I could get
Well,
involved.
Mitch.
Because that's the key
Wayne walking
point.
his dog, and then Wayne
Yeah,
told
Wayne.
Mitch, and then Mitch says, you wouldn't believe what I heard from Wayne.
Wayne.
And then,
Dwayne.
that's right.
Dwayne, I'm
Yeah.
sorry, Dwayne.
That's
And then I had been on next door and seen Andrea on there, and so I immediately looked up our city council, and I called Andrea, and she
Yeah.
was just so helpful.
I
And
just
then
think that the
I just
planning
put them together.
information, the 2030, 2040 is key. I think that's really important. Am I right or no?
I'm sorry, I'm concerned you're gonna smack this poor lady.
She's done.
We take our frustrations. out.
Yeah, I'm sorry. Yes, the same things that you had gone over just a second ago for
Yeah.
2030, those main things.
That still
Those are all
holds.
nice, pretty things that of course will be.
But are they real?
Exactly, are they real? They're real if we make them real.
They're real, they're on paper. And I think we have every right to hold the town accountable to the standards that they set
We have
themselves.
to do that.
Right.
That's right.
Just like the tree ordinance.
Yes, we can hold them accountable,
Right.
right?
Yes.
That's why it's good to have that attorney.
So the whole thing should be thrown
Why go
out.
into the zoning meeting?
It should be thrown out
This
then.
is
I would
right.
think of the
All right.
zoning
They
meeting.
have these,
Anyway,
like the
I
tree
just wanted to
ordinance.
make sure that his stipulations still carried forward.
We have a tree ordinance, where when they cut down the big trees, they
Right.
can't just go and clear cut a lot anymore. That's been there, but it was never enforced. No one ever went out and counted the trees and made the developer pay $10,000 to replace trees. Now they go out there and they physically count every single stinking tree.
They make you
Yes.
buy like carbon credits, they make you buy tree credits.
Tree
And
credits.
then they put them out on a tree farm somewhere out in like Kissimmee, you know?
And remember this,
Back on track.
you guys heard of Boozer Properties, right? They own a lot of properties, okay? They had a property right next to one of ours on Wicker Road, and we had scrub jays and tortoises on our land. We had to go to Florida Wildlife and Game. Florida Wildlife and Game, we had 9 acres, said, well, give the turtles 4 acres, and you can develop the next 5. Can you imagine the real estate price of what that land was worth? So anyway, we found out that Boozers had a property next to us. They went in with one of those Bobcat machines that just cut down everything, the scrub oaks, and they'll cut a tree down that big. And they went in and just mowed it flat in one day. We went down there, you saw the scrub jays flying everywhere. They're trying to find their homes. It was cheaper for them to pay the fine and clear it like that. And that's what they did. So.
I'll get up there in the tree.
And we don't want
you
them to
know.
happen.
Well, any other questions? I think yes.
I'll be there with you.
So, assuming that we hire the attorney and move forward in all this, do we have any research right now that's been done on, say, these different ordinances and so on that we could use to give the attorney some, so they can handle for lack of a better
My first impression, my answer is no, we haven't. We don't have that depth of research. And that is what I would think would be purview of the attorney. we're paying him for it, he knows he doesn't. I will certainly supply him with the relevant quotes from the city's own comprehensive plan, as I did you. And by the way, if anyone wants a copy of this for the emails that we write, I thought maybe it would be a good idea if, I composed 2 or 3 boilerplate emails and you could select the one you want and say you guys are in trouble. But someone told me not such a good idea because the folks they go to, you start getting 1 or 2 the same, they fall asleep and hit the delete, So each one should be crafted individually. If you want a copy of this PowerPoint presentation, my email address is mmiglis@gmail.com. It's on this handout here about the letters. Be sure you take one of these. This is your instructions for email. Just email me and I will send you this PowerPoint presentation if you want to use it as a source for your own letters.
Do you want me to pass this over?
Yeah, you can pass this.
Okay. So this is the handout.
That's the handout.
So this is all the information, right? Okay, with the...
That's not what was on the LLC.
I don't know what this is, but it's probably...
Remember what they keep telling us, the more bodies we have at these meetings, it's essential. We got to ask for
Strength in numbers.
And like Susan said, and so many others, strength in numbers. We've got to pack that zoning and planning board. I've been in touch with the watchdog reporter for Florida Today. Sent him 2 or 3 emails. Finally, he is meeting with somebody in the city of West Melbourne this coming week, he told me. And whether he'll pursue it after that, I don't know. But he's at least taking some action.
Have you heard from Hometown News?
No, I got the newspaper right there. I'm going to submit to them. The more bodies, the more media coverage, the more we, the better. Right, Adrian? So if there are no other questions, I think we can adjourn. Everybody can. Thank you. Oh, Wally.
What's the next steps?
Next step.
Party at Jeff's house.
If they prevail, there will be a party at Jeff's house. Next step, Wally, is keep our ear to the ground. Watch next door and/or our Facebook page. I'll ride around the neighborhood like Paul Revere, letting the flyers out every week or so.
Can you
keep our ear to the ground.
Facebook page is going to be under Mitchell Miglis because we're trying to delete his old page. But it'll be under Mitchell Miglis, and then a page will be created under, not Mitch, Mitchell.
Okay.
And Mitch, I think what he mentioned about the rezoning, very important, great
Yes.
idea.
I
Great
wish we
idea,
knew
just in
about
case.
this.
If we was able to get it
You've
rezoned
been there.
from our favor, something better.
We have to look into what's going to come next.
Yeah.
Well, the next is if that zoning meeting is April 12th.
I mean, what happens after that? What do we do with the next building that wants to come in? How do we direct them? What would we like to
I
have?
wish I had an answer for you. I think it's going to be moving action. If we can drive away this developer because it's such a forum, maybe the property sits long enough, other options become apparent. We just don't know. Potentially, they could put 21 homes.
We'll buy it, develop it?
No.
Somebody mentioned something about this meeting today, that you were going to do something with volunteering for things that you might need.
Yes, it's a good, thank you very much. Paul and his wife Karen are the petitions committee. Does someone want to be head of the sign committee?
Sign?
Signs. We're thinking of doing neighborhood signs,
Did you talk to Chip about that? You told me.
Chip is,
I've got,
you want to put signs in your yards, so that no.
I can help with that.
You can help with that?
I can help
Okay.
with that.
Yeah. So,
I'll
you
design
can shoot
the
me an email,
signs.
I'll post it or post it.
Mitch, did everybody sign?
Everybody sign the petition?
Both petitions?
Oh.
If you-
Oh, and, oh,
No,
we
we need
have,
the other petition, the non-primary or non-principal.
we have one other committee. The Chip is the head
No,
of.
that's the general.
Chip,
Wait,
no, you were the.
that's the secondary or, so there's not 3 petitions going around, there's just 2? And that's the general. Okay, thank you.
I guess we're adjourned for now, so thank you very much, everybody.